speakers today. First one is Evelyn. And Evelyn is our advanced communicator goal level and has been a Toastmaster for 14 years. And she's currently a member of Amador Valley Toastmaster and Prep Squad. And she placed 3 times at the previous District 57 humor speech and evaluation contest. Writing stories and sharing them with others is something that delights her. And we'll hear from her today as well. And then following that, we have Dennis. Dennis is a writer and educator from Silicon Valley. He is a distinguished Toastmaster and past District 57 governor, 2010 to 2011. Thank you for your service. And he enjoys volunteering as a drawing instructor for local elementary schools and also appears as Santa Claus at San Jose Christmas in the Park. Will you be doing that again this year? Last but not least, we have Brandon, who is our distinguished Toastmaster, Brandon James Murray, and he has joined us in the organization ever since 1997. Wow. He's a past District 57 Toastmaster of the Year, Table Topics Champion, and Humor Speech Champion. He is the past president of Tall and Tell Storytelling Club and the Laugh Lovers Humorous Club. Wow, that just long list. Great work. He's a big fan of stories and storytelling. I can't wait. And after each speaker's finish their speeches, then we'll go into a Q&A session. Without further ado, I'll turn to our speakers.
Woo-hoo! Once again, thank you, Renee, and thank you, everybody, for the chance to be here tonight. I am excited about this because I'm always excited about stories. And what we're going to talk about tonight is why storytelling matters. Why is it important? Why are you even here tonight to hear us ramble on? Then we're going to go into some story structure, and we're going to have a story writing exercise. Then we're going to focus a little bit on telling travel stories. And once again, we'll get into an exercise, but this time it will be storytelling. Finally, we'll have a break with some Q&A, and then we'll talk about storytelling for business. And we're going to have you share some short stories. So I hope you're ready for a wild ride, but first the question must be answered, why does storytelling matter? It's a big thing for me because when I was growing up, my mom was a natural born storyteller. And she was always popular with her friends and always telling stories. As a kid, I was thinking of how inaccurate and factually misleading those stories were, but they always entertained and they always told the truth, and they stick with me today. And my dream is to one day to be 1/2 as good a storyteller as my mom, Jean Murphy. And one of these days, I hope it will happen based on what I'm learning with my friends in Toastmasters and outside of Toastmasters as well. But this person, I think, has an interesting quote. He's a cognitive psychologist, Jerome Bruner. He passed away in 2016, but he believes that we are 22 times more likely to remember a fact when it has been wrapped in a story. Imagine the power of that. Instead of giving an informational speech and using slides like I am right now, you tell a story and your point becomes memorable. That's why storytelling matters. And that's why I'm proud to bring up to the little invisible Zoom podium, my brother from another mother, Dennis Dawson.
That's me. Thank you all. Yes, we're going to talk about the basic structure of a story. Any story is going to follow a particular rhythm, a particular path, and people expect this story path every single time. And if you deliver it for them, you're going to have a successful story. So every story starts out by just describing normal life for a person, normal life for a place. But at some point, there's a conflict that occurs. We call that the inciting incident. That is the spark for what happens, all the action that follows. That one incident creates a crisis after crisis after crisis. Eventually, it comes to a climax where the hero overcomes this great obstacle, and after that, the story is over and we have our resolution. You've seen that ever since high school, but the arc of that particular curve is not really the way a story is actually put together. So let's start by choosing someone to be the focal point for our story, your protagonist. You have to have somebody people care about. So we want to know, what is it the protagonist wants? What's going to prevent them from having that? And what obstacles are they going to have to overcome in order to succeed and be happy and achieve the goal that they're looking for? So we've got Luke Skywalker here. What does he want? He wants adventure. He wants to get off of Tatooine. What's preventing it? His aunt and uncle. And he's stuck until, unfortunately, his aunt and uncle are killed. And at that point, he's launched off on his adventure. Tess, from Working Girl, what does she want? She wants to be taken seriously in business. She wants to be a financial professional. But all the men around her treat her like she's just some sort of idiot. So she's got to overcome that perception in order for her to achieve her goals. And there we go. And Ralphie, of course, he wants a BB gun, but every adult around him is going to tell him he's going to shoot his eye out. So all of our protagonists here have a goal, they have specific obstacles, and the entire story is about them overcoming the obstacles. When they overcome their obstacles, the story ends. Now, every story has got an ending, but before you get there, you have to have a great beginning and a great middle. If you don't have all three elements, what you got is probably a grandpa story. You know, the stories that your grandpa would tell you late at night. And I just want to tell you all about the time when I went to Shelbyville and I tied an onion on my belt because that was the fashion in those days. And I needed to get on the train, and the train only accepted quarters. And I would say, give me 2 B's for a quarter, because that's what we called a quarter in those days, 2 B's, you know, going on and never really getting to the point. Every story needs a point. Everybody wants to know where you're going and how you're going to get there. So the more realistic structure of a story looks more like this chart. You have the beginning and the opening scenes, and the whole idea here is to introduce the person. Or if it's a milieu story, a story about a place like The Lord of the Rings or The Little Mermaid, then you want to understand the environment where the hero lives. You want to understand their world. But again, you've got that crisis, very small one at the beginning. That's the one that sets the person off on their mission. They're going to overcome several crises over the course of time. Then they have the big climax, but notice after the climax, there is a precipitous drop because you want the ending to come just as quickly as possible. Yeah, the only reason that it's going to extend is because you've had a very long story leading into it. Another way to look at this would be Joseph Campbell's hero's journey. It's down here in the bottom left of this chart. Send me an email, I'll send you this cheat sheet. It's absolutely fantastic. But let's talk about Luke Skywalker's adventures in terms of the hero's journey. He had a normal life, ordinary, living on Tatooine, but he's called to adventure when he gets the message from Princess Leia. At first he says, oh no, I can't go off adventuring, I've got things to do. But then his mentor tells him, no, you have to go forward. And he leaves home because of the crisis. His caretakers are killed. So he goes off on the road. He has to prepare for danger. He confronts his great fear. That's Darth Vader. Darth Vader kills Obi-Wan Kenobi. The hero hits bottom. From that point on, though, as he gathers himself up, they get the secret that they need in order to destroy the Death Star. And that's where the action begins to build, build, build. And it doesn't let up until the Death Star is destroyed and Luke is able to rejoin his companions. This formula is the hero's journey. It works for Luke Skywalker. It worked for Odysseus way back in prehistoric times. These are the stories that are going to propel us forward and bring us along with the character. Now, when you have a great beginning, and this is where we want to show Luke again, the story of Star Wars doesn't begin, I should say. A long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, there was a boy named Luke. He lived on a farm. He used to grow crops. The crops he grew were sorghum and something called booty bay. And no. The first thing you see is an exciting space battle in the Star Wars film. We don't get to Luke until 15 or 20 minutes into the movie. That's done on purpose. The actual story of Luke Skywalker, this was originally called the Skywalker Saga. It wasn't called Star Wars. It wasn't called Return of the Jedi. But in order to get the film sold, he had to pick episode 4, the one that had the most space battles, the one that had the most excitement. That's the reason they were able to greenlight the film. So you want to do the same thing with your stories. You want to start with the most exciting scene you possibly can, and then you go back and do some of the fill-in work. But that way you're grabbing your reader right away with an exciting beginning. Now, this is an observation of my own, but I promise you, if you go try to check this out, you will find it to be absolutely true. If you go to the middle page of a book, right in the center, you're going to find something that changes right there. If you go to the middle of a movie, right to that minute, and look on either side just a little bit, there's going to be a major change that happens at that minute in the movie. And that major change sets the course for the rest of the film. So at the beginning, you've got maybe a quarter of the story to introduce the characters, but it's time to get moving. For that next quarter of the story, you're just kind of wandering and you're hitting dead ends. You're not really achieving anything. You may be getting frustrated in the story. If it's a mystery, you're finding all the wrong clues. If it's a travel story, you're not getting where you want to go. But at that midpoint, all of a sudden, your character knows what they should be doing. And all the action from then on is heading true north, trying to get to the finish. Now at the 3/4 mark, this is when you begin the final push right through to the climax of your story. There should be no let up in the adventure at this point. There should be no release of tension. You want to build it as tightly as possible, get it completely wound up, so that when you finally hit that climax, you have a very satisfying obstacle overcome, and that lets you lead into a very satisfying ending. And that's what we want, is a resolution. It's not just that the story's over, and then the Death Star blew up. Thanks, everybody. Be sure to buy popcorn on your way out. No. The Death Star blows up. Luke and his friends go back to a planet. Now, it's not half an hour of everybody shaking hands and kissing. It's about 5 minutes, and you see all of them gathered, and everybody gets a medal. It's a very satisfying ending, but it's over quickly. That's why I say the climax, boom, right near the end of the story, right near the end of the film, but immediately afterward, you want to get the resolution, make it happen. Now, I happen to choose this scene from Lord of the Rings. I don't know how many of you saw the film, all of you, but at the end of The Return of the King, that movie has no fewer than 7 endings. And if you had a big gulp during the movie, and you're sitting there and you're saying, oh, thank goodness this movie's over, and then here comes the next ending. Oh no, I have to sit through this, I can't miss this. And then the third ending, oh no, and you're squirming, because the movie never ends. Well, it had such a buildup all the way through. You've watched 9 hours of film. It had to have those 7 endings in order to get that completely satisfactory resolution that everyone needed in order to feel good about the end of the story. So that's what we're looking for. We're looking for beginning with a bang. We have a middle that seems to go off course at first, but right when you hit the middle of the story, they find true north and they're headed where they need to go. The last quarter of the story is a big sprint with no release in tension, right up to the climax. And from that, you have your relaxation and your denouement. So let's try a story writing exercise right now. I would like all of you, I should have told you to have a pencil and paper handy, but you can type it on your computer because you're sitting at a computer. What I'm looking for is for you to come up with a protagonist, give your protagonist a goal, come up with 3 obstacles for your protagonist, figure out what the climax is going to be, the big obstacle that they will overcome at the end, and then what the resolution will be. So once again, come up with a protagonist, give that person a goal, give them obstacles that are going to prevent them from hitting that goal, the big climax, and the final denouement. I'm going to give you about 5 minutes to work on that, and then we'll have some share out with people giving 1-minute versions of their great new story. Now, this is probably the first story any of you have written today. That's good. Maybe this week. For some of you, maybe it's been longer than that. Whatever story you write, it's wonderful. You have created something new. You have brought something new into the world. I'm going to make it easy on myself and ask Dan to share his story, Dan Murgett. Because I saw him very industrious there. I'd like to see more videos on, by the way, if you turn your video on so we can see your reaction to Dan's great story. Go, Dan.
Thank you. So I'm not really too sure if you wanted a full fleshed out story or just the high points. All I wrote down were the high points, so I'm lacking all of the details in between.
Just the high points because we are giving you 1 minute and go.
Okay, the high point. The protagonist is Rex the dog. And his goal, he smells food inside and he wants it. The 3 obstacles. Before his owner started cooking, they let him outside. He can't get back, he can't get in. Eventually finds his way into a back door, but he knows that he can't get the food until the owner is looking someplace else. So he's got to come up with a distraction so that they're not watching when he gets onto it. And the final obstacle, the table's too high. At the climax, he's made his way from the top to the top of the refrigerator, had to make a mighty leap to the table. The dénouement, of course, is when he grabs the food from the table and rushes out the back door with his owner chasing after him. Doesn't matter, he's got the food.
That's excellent. That could actually be based on a true story. I know that we found our little dog on the top of the refrigerator one time when we'd gone out for a short time, and she didn't know how to get down. Excellent. I see Don Davis, I saw you working. Am I saying that right, Don or Donnie?
It's Donnie.
Donnie, okay.
Well, my story is about a widow named Jennifer who would love to meet a new man. She joins a dating app and has a terrible experience. Every man she dates just wants to talk about himself. Then she gets set up by a friend on a blind date, and he is so over the top egotistical, she swears she'll never talk to another man again. Then COVID happens and she can't meet anyone at all. So she decides to go hiking, and she falls on the trail. Well, right after she falls, a veterinarian passes her with his dog and asks if she needs some help. They end up hiking back together and go for coffee, and well, I'll let you imagine what happens next.
Mm-hmm. See, and her big mistake is that she wanted a new man. Ladies, you want an old man. I'm just saying, let's see. I don't have a name on you. I want to call on Joseph Colgan.
Thank you. My story is about a guy named Joe who lives in San Jose. He gradually comes to realize that he's been living for hundreds of years. His goal is to find out how this can be and, what is his true origin. One of the obstacles is his blood will cure COVID-19. And a lot of people want to use him as a lab rat. So he's constantly having to avoid capture. He knows there are at least 2 others like him. Whenever he starts to approach them, like blow up a building and escape from him. Unfortunately, I haven't gotten to the climax yet. So you'll have to wait till the movie comes out.
You see what happens? It's this Michael Bay effect. The huge explosion is not the climax of the story anymore. That's nice. I like the way we're getting such different stories using the same structure. And you'll want to remember the structure and use it later on when you're writing stories with Brendan and Evelyn. Now, I see Marcia Davis Cannon out there. Can you share with us the story that you have come up with the skeleton for? You are still muted. We still can't hear you, Marcia.
Yeah, we can go to Ravi. Ravi is ready.
Okay, we'll go to Ravi. Remember, I tried, Marcia.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay. It was an important Monday morning. It was like I was late to my performance review, which I have been waiting since 7 years. I got up late because of too much work the night before. This is a different kind of work. I can't find the keys. Somehow, I lose my keys every Friday, and they tend to disappear on every Monday. After a hassle, I found them in my car. I started the engine to figure out that it is low on gas. Somehow, I filled enough gas within 2 minutes that will take me to the office. I went on the road, and I was lucky that there was no traffic. Luckily, I reached office for my important interview on time, just to figure out that the office is shut down because of COVID.
Yes, I noticed that COVID is going to factor a lot into the stories that people are going to be telling now, because that's very upfront in people's minds right now. I'm afraid that I have to leave, but that only means that you get more time with Evelyn and Brendan. Thank you so much. Great job, everybody. Carry those skills forward as you continue in the adventure you're on tonight. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dennis. Appreciate the setting us up with our basics. I'm going to share my screen now. All right. What most Toastmasters tend to do, or you will often hear in our clubs, are travel stories. But they often leave us nodding off. I wanted to share a few tips that help you capture the audience's attention and hold it. The first thing we want to do is let the audience know what are your expectations. So here is an example. In this photo, we'll call the couple John and Susan is the storyteller. She begins her story by saying, "My boyfriend John and I were having trouble in our relationship. We decided backpacking in the mountains, enjoying nature, would be a great way for us to connect. The trail we picked was going to be really tough, and we would only have each other to rely on. But we were sure it would be a great way to strengthen our relationship." Okay, so Susan has set clear expectations for her trip with John. But what I'd like to know from all of you, let me see if I can go to, I can see a few of you. Oh, there we go, gallery view. I would like you to put your thumb up or down if you agree or disagree with what will happen to her expectations. That's right. Many of you are expecting disaster, which is great. That means that you, the audience, have your own expectations. That means you're now invested in Susan's story, and that kind of thing is what every storyteller wants. The next thing you absolutely need to include when you're sharing a story about a trip you've taken is to describe what you see, what you hear, what you smell, and what you feel. It's these elements that help bring your story to life. So in my little example here, I might say, hot under the sun, salty sweat on our faces, our boots crunch, crunch, crunched across the trail. It felt so good when a cool breeze blew down from the mountain, refreshing us with the scent of pine. Now I have a second example. So what I would like for everyone to do is imagine that you are at the beach. However, you are blindfolded. And the reason that I'm saying you're blindfolded is because almost everyone remembers to talk about what they see. Very few people remember to describe what they hear, smell, or feel. So in the chat window, I would like you to type 1 or 2 words about something you heard or smelled or felt at the beach.
Evelyn, we got a crash of waves. We also got a sea salt. I don't know if that's tasting, smelling, or inhaling. We have waves crashing, of course, and seagulls. We're getting those seagulls cawing at you. Calmness of wave sounds. Sand flies in my eggs, unlies on my legs, excuse me. The breeze, the salty air, peace. Somebody felt peace. The
Nice.
aroma of decaying fish. I'm sorry, that person's no fun. No, just joking. Frigid cold water. Now we're talking. Children laughing, the warmth of the sun, and seaweed and calm, hot sand under your feet. Matthew found sharks, of course.
Thank you. Thank you. That's great. Excellent descriptions. And the one point that someone mentioned was how they actually felt about something. And I want to let you know that it's okay to talk either about what you feel like on your skin, your touch, or what you feel within yourself. You feel sleepy, you feel relaxed. That also conveys a sense of place and how brings life to your story to the audience. Thank you very much. Let's go on to our next one. As you're sharing your story, now you're into the body of it and you're explaining where you went, what you did. Try to sprinkle in some humor because it's that holds the audience's attention. You can add funny photos that you may have taken on your trip, something really cute or something literally goofy that you posed in. Or if you are able, share your own jokes. Tell a funny story. Now, here's a little tip that I use a lot, and that is, being super funny is difficult for me, but Google is wonderful. So I recommend that you Google for jokes that might be related to your trip or vacation. So for this exercise, I Googled flying. And here's a joke that I could use one day if I'm telling a travel story that includes my flight. I tend to get very nervous about flying, but a good friend reassured me. She said, "Oh, Evelyn, don't worry. Flying isn't dangerous. Crashing is."
Yeah.
But even if the audience is groaning at the bad joke, it still counts as entertaining. All right, before we go on to the conclusion, I want to share with you 2 advanced techniques that you can apply to any story. The first one is a way to hint at something unexpected that will happen in your story without sharing it right up front. The technique is to introduce an expectation. Then you add the word but, and you conclude with a statement that is contrary to the expectation. Let me give you an example. All right, when our little group boarded the boat, we were ready to enjoy a 3-hour tour, but we should have noticed the dark storm clouds building on the horizon. So that lets the audience know, uh-oh, something terrible is going to happen farther along in this story. I'm going to listen now. So it's a great way to hold the audience's attention and get them involved. The other thing you can do is to add a character to help tie all your travel events together. They're fairly disparate, except that maybe they're all taking place in the same place. So on my trip to Italy, I went to Venice, I went to Florence, I traveled in a crazy taxi ride. Those are all individual events, but there's nothing really to tie them together very well. However, I can do that by adding a character. One is a literal character. For instance, maybe I brought along Grandma, and every time a new event happened on our trip, maybe Grandma does something funny, or she has some words of wisdom, or maybe she cracks a joke. That reference back to Grandma throughout the trip of the story helps tie all the places together in the audience's mind. Now, the character doesn't always have to be a person. It can also be a thing. So for example, maybe it's an enormous suitcase with a squeaky wheel that maybe I took on my trip to Italy. All through the trip, anytime I talk about traveling to another city in Italy, the suitcase now becomes this joke I have to deal with. And I can have a lot of fun having the squeak, squeak, squeak of the wheels at inopportune times. And of course, you want to end your story so it makes sense to the audience. And one way to do that is to let them know, were your expectations that you introduced at the beginning, were they met? If we return to the story about Susan and her boyfriend, John, Susan's conclusion was the toughness of the climb up the mountain was super stressful, but it helped us learn two things. First, we really should have gotten in better shape before attempting the hike, but also that John and I can rely on each other. Standing on that peak together, we felt triumph and a renewed strength in our relationship. So Susan's conclusion addresses the expectations she introduced at the beginning of her story. She also ends it at the top of the mountain, which feels like a great accomplishment and a story ending. However, myself, I am one of those people who would wonder, then what happened? Did they make it both down safely in one piece? So my preference would be at least include one sentence to let us know, did they get back home? That just makes those people like me who need to have a complete story, we get that full conclusion. Before we do our practice, does anyone have any questions?
There's a question. Yeah.
There's one question in the chat. What is the technical or theatrical name of the object that is in all the critical scenes?
I don't know. I've just been calling them a character. Does anybody know if someone's in theater, what that would be called? I'll have to get back to you on that one.
We'll work with Dennis to make sure it happens. I don't have that answer either, but
Okay.
we'll work with that and get back to you.
Any other questions? All right, well then let's go ahead and try to create a very short travel story. I would, if I could have some, I wish I had my chat. If I could have someone write in it, or Brendan, I'll just have you type what I would like is for you to have a place you plan to travel to, and let us know what your expectations of that trip will be. And then one little thing that happens in that trip, and then give us a conclusion, letting us know were your expectations met. And they don't necessarily always have to be met. Not every story ends happily. And I'll do like Dennis, I'll go ahead and give you 5 minutes. Okay, let's go ahead. I'll look at I see Mobala has put it into the chat. I really liked her expectation was on her trip to the Grand Canyon, she was looking forward to walking on the glass bottom lookout. And then at the end, she freaked out and she told us how it felt. It felt like someone had pulled the land from underneath my feet. In a very short story, that is enough to let us know. She gave us the expectation at the beginning and how she felt at the end. Good job. Thank you for that story. How about Paul? I see you there. Want to share your trip?
Hi, Evelyn. Thank
Hi.
you so much. So my story is that I go to Disneyland. I love Disneyland so much. I really want to go there back this year, but because of the COVID situation, I cannot. My expectations are to go on all the rides till midnight, go on all the roller coasters. Technically speaking, I do not want to do that in actuality because I'm utterly afraid of roller coasters. Since it's just a story, we'll just keep it that way. And my last expectation is to stay in the best 5-star hotel. But unfortunately, when I went there, the rides had stopped working for some reason. And the 5-star hotel that I really wanted to stay in, all the hotels rooms were booked. So unfortunately, the trip ended with a disaster. So my expectations did not get fulfilled.
Oh, so sad. And Disney's such a happy place. That actually is really nice because it contrasts with our expectations of Disneyland. So good job. Thank you for that. How about Ming? Do you want to share with us your story?
I like to share a story that my wife and I went to Hawaii to hike the the trail along the coast, Kalalau Trail. And our expectation is we go there early, we're going to see a beautiful view and the scenery, and then we're going to see the fall. And we hiked about 2 or 3 miles. We had a great time. Then there's several creeks stopped us. And we see people very athletic jumping over on the different stones. I feel like I can do that too. And then we're debating whether we should go on, risk, or we should turn around. Many people turn around because the water. In the end, what we decided, we just walked through the water. We realized water actually just about a little bit above knee high. The drawback is you're going to walk with your wet shoes all the way up, all the way down. And so we decided to do that. And it turns out to be a beautiful thing because there's so many creeks, we have to walk in with the boots back and forth. In the end, we end to the fall, we take a beautiful picture that's just beautiful all the way. And then we come back, we spend about 3 or 4 hours total, just have a great time.
Very good, very good. One of the things I liked best about your story is when you were indicating your expectations, you had a series of 3 things you wanted to do. And the third thing was the waterfalls, which is water related. The next thing you began to talk about was your adventure with the creeks. So that relationship, putting those 2 things next to each other was a great way to place it in order in your story. Very good. Let's see, how about, let me go to a new page of people. How about Minnie Rawat? Are you there?
Hello.
Hi. You want to tell us? Yes.
Okay. So I had traveled. My place is Alaska. So I traveled to Alaska, and I wanted to see the glaciers and Denali National Park, the wildlife in the national park, and the Northern Lights. So so one interesting or like an obstacle I ran into was like a hailstorm, which was on my route to Denali, and it was pretty scary. I was traveling by myself, and it wasn't really a big car, but I got out of it, and I managed to see some wildlife in the national park, and also ended up seeing a bit of like Northern Lights. So it was overall interesting and a fun trip.
Very good, very good. I like that it was an adventure. It began out as just something beautiful that you were going to enjoy, but then Mother Nature threw something your way, and in the end, you still enjoyed yourself. That's a very positive story. Thank you very much, Minnie. How are we doing for time, Brendan? Still okay?
You have time for one more, I believe.
Okay, let's see. Let me go to the third page here. How about Aman Kataria? Aman, are you there?
Hey, that's me, Monica. Hello?
Hello?
Yeah, that's Monica.
Oh, Monica?
Yep. So I'm going to share what happened with me last week. Can you hear me?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, so last week I planned a trip to Golden Gate Bridge. I thought I'll take a ride and I would try out my new lens. So I bought a new wide lens for landscape photography, and I wanted to capture that perfect Golden Gate Bridge at sunset. So I planned like 4-5 days ahead, looking into which is that perfect, clear, sunny day. And I hit the road on time perfectly to reach Golden Gate. When I reached, I was super happy because there were very less tourists because of COVID. So I perfectly got a spot and fixed my tripod, and I was ready to start clicking. What happened was that as soon as I turned on my camera, I realized that I'd forgot to charge my camera.
Oh.
So despite being on time, I thought that, okay, well, I was a little disappointed, but I thought, hey, I could charge it with my car. So I went back, I ran to my car, I plugged the charger in, and I tried to get some battery on to at least click few photos. Even though I was charging my camera, but the moment had passed and the light went by, the sun had already set. So eventually I wasn't able to get that perfect sunset photo. So yeah, I had to come back home.
Oh, I'm so sorry. What I really enjoyed about that story is in the initial focus was about on something beautiful you were going to achieve, and you were very well planned. You were there at the right time, and then the story just veered a totally different way because it became all about the camera and what you were struggling to do with the camera versus the scene. And I found that very interesting. Take that, you definitely could make that into a speech. Thank you all for participating in this section of our session. Appreciate it. That was fun. And now I would like to pass it along to Brendan Murphy.
Sure. Pass it along to me just in time for our break. Yes, indeed, ladies and gentlemen, Dennis is making us take a little break right now, and it's just going to be for 10 minutes. And if you could come back at 7:39, we'll get started. In between, after you use the room of requirement or get yourself some more gin, feel free to ask us some informal questions. So Evelyn, can you tell us a travel story in 30 seconds or less?
Let me think. My husband and I, actually, this is the end of a travel story. We had gone to Iceland. I loved it so much. I said, let's spend as much as we can outdoors on our final day, admiring the beautiful landscape. It's just amazing. icy and barren, and waterfalls appearing here and there, and little farmhouses that are colorful. Well, at last we had to give up and go to the airport. It was time to leave. And we dragged over there, we returned the car, we got into the airport, and they said, "Oh, we're sorry, your flight was canceled. You'll have to go out tomorrow." Yay! We can go back out and see more of the scenery. That was a great way to extend the vacation.
Hi, Evelyn. I just have a quick question for you.
Sure.
I'm attending this for an extra credit, this thing. I'm taking a class in college, a communications class, and my teacher wanted me to do an extra credit assignment, so she suggested attending this. Is there
Oops, you quit out.
a way that can show that I attended this meeting?
Yeah.
That
would
A screenshot.
Yeah, the screenshot.
Okay.
Actually, that would come from Renee or Abby. If you guys could just write them a little note and give them some credit, and so long as you gave us an A+, we'll give you the same.
I believe Abhijit is doing the recording, so the recording is clearly going to show your presence.
Yeah.
Oh, that's true. Yeah. And he even participated in a question. So I see here, Kim has asked a question. Did anyone catch what Dennis said when he described how the beginning, middle, and end are supposed to be? I only got this written down. Begin with a bang, and then you get to the middle. The middle is basically, so the hero has a goal, and the middle of your story is obstacles that are put in the way of that goal. And then the ending is the resolution. Does the hero reach his goal, or is it disaster?
In addition, while he did mention that the middle is full of obstacles and resolutions, he did point out that often right about the middle of the story, the situation changes in some fundamental way.
Good point. Yes, yes.
So that from that midpoint, you're driving towards the conclusion.
Right. Thank you.
So when it comes to telling stories which you have lived through or which are real, which you have experienced in real life, it's comparatively easy than coming up with stories which are purely fictional. So how do you craft a story which is probably going to be fictional, or a major part of it is going to be fictional? So like we can go through the same flow, we can build the context, but sometimes it's difficult for me to get something which is purely fictional.
And the same rules apply of storytelling, whether it's your own based on a true story or totally fictional. The same kind of things which Dennis and Evelyn shared with you still apply. So a fictional story for you, you might try something as taking that travel scenario and putting it travel in the future. Maybe you did that during the exercise, but that would be a totally fictional story even though you are in it. So you might try something halfway as you go to fictional and make it step by step, but your imagination will keep on going. On that sheet that Dennis shared, he talked about writer's block and structure and how you can go about writing. That is a great gift for you to start thinking of how to write fiction.
All right.
That's a good option, Brendan, because by putting yourself in the story, even if you're now in an unusual situation or unrealistic, you're in outer space or it's the future, it's easier to know how the character would feel because it's you. And when something happens, just express how would you deal with that. If a man suddenly appeared before you with a sword and a tiger by his side, what's your reaction? And then do you have special powers? It's your story, you can determine that. And then what you would do.
All right.
I'm not sure any story is ever going to be 100% fictional. I mean, I talked about Rex the dog, but of course that was based on real life dogs that I've seen. I did a tall tale once in which I discovered that fish were actually super intelligent, godlike beings, but a surprising number of elements from that story were taken from things that had happened in real life, albeit I took them completely out of context. and added a completely fictional item as the central point of the story. But a lot of the parts that weren't central to the story were actually from life.
Yeah.
Right.
So even for a fictional story, the inspiration is going to be based off something real, and then you build your imagination on top of it.
Yeah, I think it would be, the story will be more believable and authentic if you do that versus completely, you know, no rules, just creating whatever. Yeah.
If nothing else, your personal experiences or other people's experiences do serve as a good reservoir of ideas.
Yes, that's great. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much, everybody, for the Q&A, and thank you, Evelyn, for the travel stories. I'd like to build on what you've heard from our previous two speakers and focus on storytelling for business or storytelling for you in your organization. And I want to talk about 3 types of stories you will see in organizations, and they come from one of my favorite resources, the Great Course, which we use a lot in Tales and Tellers Toastmasters. It's called The Art of Storytelling from Parents to Professionals. It's by Professor Hannah B. Harvey, and she's a doctor and she studied storytelling. It's an amazing resource for me. And the idea of professionals telling stories, it seems a little goofy. Stories are for kids or for sitting around a campfire, but no, they are for business. So the 3 types of stories you'll see at your work are the part of a presentation. You're given a presentation and you tell a story, slip in a little story there. And that's the kind of thing that you'll see again and again, but the presentation will still be 500 slides, just like our presentation. But the idea is that stories become part of that to enhance that. Then there's a tale of the organization. Oh, we were founded back in 1999 and we did this and this and that. And that is part of the myth of the organization that you carry forward, and it helps guide people and their expectations on how to live into this organization. And then finally, people use stories for community building. Remember that time when we were coding up to midnight and suddenly nothing worked? And you tell those stories and you laugh together, you share them together as a team, and they make things quite effective. Something I need to say is only connect. This is my favorite quote in the whole wide world. It's from E.M. Forster. I was in college and I was assigned this book to read and I didn't have time. And even worse, this was before the internets and I couldn't find Cliff Notes to tell me what I was going to write on. I opened up the books thinking, how much can I read before dawn? And it was midnight, and I saw this quote on the opening pages before the actual title: only connect, only connect. And I realized I didn't need to read anymore. Sure enough, the theme of the test for this book was about connections. I didn't know any of the characters, but I went off on the idea of connection. And this is one of my major themes in my life. How do we connect with ourselves, with each other? And if you believe in the higher power, those types of connections. And that's what we should strive to do. When you tell a story, whether it's at work or not, but especially at work, make sure it's connected to something. It may be a great story, but if it's not connected, you lose, no matter how wonderfully you've crafted your story for work. So please remember to connect, only connect. So Professor Harvey has these 5 hints for telling stories at work or work telling. The first is have heroes and villains. Now, not in the classic sense, like Dennis as a villain and Evelyn as a hero. You can easily see that, of course, but the company may be a hero and some other company is the villain, or an idea that somebody has to share within the company, but there's villains of other ideas or people who want to poo-poo that idea. So make sure you definitely have that dramatic tension between opposing forces. You need a hero, you need a villain, you need somebody for something and somebody against that same something. And those heroes and villains do some kind of contest, and they become the thematic impulse for the story. Then you also want to be approachable and confident. These are people at work, they're professional. You need to know your story so well that you are confident with it, and if some interruptions come along, you're like, oh no, you interrupted me, the story's over, I'm going home. No, you're still approachable and you're confident because you know your story so well. Dennis and Evelyn will tell you the way to get to this point of confidence and approachability is to write your story, rewrite it some more, get input and rewrite it again, and do it over and over till even if there's an interruption, you're still confident and therefore you're relaxed and approachable at work. And then if you can remember this, story first, point second. One of my favorite professional speakers is Zig Ziglar. He passed away a few years ago, but he always talked about the power of story and making sure you have a point with that story. So I would encourage you to tell that story at the opening or near the opening, and then tell the point, because the story should be entertaining. And then you draw the enlightenment out of that story. Tell the story first, then give the point of the story. And if at all possible, add levity. I am part of Laugh Lovers, not because I'm good at humor, but because I want to be better at humor, because humor is power. Humorous storytelling, I think, is the most powerful communication tool you can have. So always work on storytelling and humor combined with that. Add levity, and please remember, in most work locations, the only emotion that's really acceptable is laughter. And so if you can connect emotionally with your audience through a humorous tale, that levity will work wonders for you. And please, please, please be brief. Brevity is necessary. Most of the stories that you've probably told, maybe in Toastmasters, 5 to 7 minutes, can be compressed to 90-second versions, not 90-minute, 90-second versions that you can use at mixers, and you can connect to different types of topics. And those anecdotes are perfect little bite-sized stories that you can put into your presentations without going on and on and on. So take your stories and compress them and get to the very core of what that story is about. And to do that tonight, we're going to have a little exercise, and we're going to ask you to share some very, very short, extremely short stories. This exercise is from a professor at my work location. I work for Stanford Healthcare, but the Graduate School of Business there has Jennifer Acker, and she's a professor there, and she uses this exercise to get people thinking about brief stories. And you expand on this, but start with this very brief formula. What you're going to do for this exercise is you're going to create 6-word stories. 6 words. That's it. Your story has 6 words. And there's no more, no less. You need at least 6. And that's all you get. 6-word stories. Very powerful. It has to be a complete story. There's obviously a lot of details that are missing, and the imagination is filled in by the audience, but still, it's a complete story. And Hemingway's example is the classic. And for those of you who already know it, congratulations. But for those of you who don't, I've always been amazed at this. He was challenged to write a story with 6 words, and this is what he came up. For sale, baby shoes, never worn. That's a story. And you, as the audience, can take it in many different directions, but that is still a story. So we're going to ask you to do some 6-word stories tonight, and I'm going to give you some examples. In addition to Hemingway, we have 3 characters who want to share theirs. First, me. I created this one. Dennis said so, so I'm here. 6 words, and I hope the message is clear. That's why I'm here tonight, because Dennis said, congratulations, you're speaking on Wednesday. And I was like, what? So I had to rearrange my schedule, and here I am. And I tell that story without those details in just 6 words. Dennis said so, so I'm here. Now, our friend Evelyn used to run track, and her theme is connected to that, and I think it's fantastic. First place, final lap, trip, no! Or Evelyn, how would you say it?
Like that, exactly. No! Add a little sobbing at the end.
There we go. Add tears for the Zoom camera. So these are nice stories. The details, so many of the details are gone, but still it is a story. And these become starting points for your other stories. Dennis put this out here. Sheriff detained with his own handcuffs. Sheriff detained with his own handcuffs. Now, this could be serious. Oh, the sheriff was at a riot and somebody came up, grabbed his handcuffs and detained him, and he became kidnapped. Or you could make it humorous. Sheriff detained with his own handcuffs. He came home late from partying with his friends, and his wife found his handcuffs and chained him to the kitchen table. These are the types of things that you can take those stories in different way. But imagine a 6-word story. And because it's only 6 words, I am going to give you 60 seconds, maybe a little bit more, to come up with that. And then I'm going to be calling on random people to share their 6-word stories. Going to keep these examples up here. Please create your 6-word stories now.
Biba says, baby hummingbird born in my backyard.
Nice. Fantastic. Very nicely done. All right. With that, I'd like to pick on one of my friends, Abby. Abby, what's your 6-word personal story?
Painting completed. Fuming boss needs empathy.
Nicely done. Nicely done. All right. A little bit of humor in there as well. And of course, it's always nice to pick on our Toastmaster of the evening, Renee. How is your 6-word personal story sounding?
Can you come back to me?
Was that 6 words? Oh, I think that was. Okay. Nicely done. Renee, we will come back to
Oh my
God, that's 6 words.
There's a few more in the chat. So from Cedric, we have brace for impact. Brace for impact. Woo, that one's good. Marcia Davis says, done climbing ladders, now lifting others. Nice. Inspirational.
Yeah, so once again, I just want to put some comments on that, the idea of done climbing ladders. Oh, is the story over? No, a new phase has begun. Fantastic. What's the next one, Evelyn?
Next one is, holy cow, whole day just work. That's from Rajesh.
You got it. And the holy cow, what a great way to get attention. Like we talked about Star Wars grabbing your attention with the space battle. So this is very, very important. The holy cow gets it and explains what's going on. Something else.
Carlos says, tomato plants, warm sun, explosion. Yum. I don't know. That one kind of makes me think the tomatoes burst in his face.
Once again, you can take that story in different ways, but the power of the word yum, the power of the word yum is something that you want to be aware when you tell your 6-word stories. Somebody else? Anything else, Evelyn, in there?
We have Nagamani says, my orchid plant, beautiful, slow character.
Wow, almost a haiku as well as a 6-word story. So how could we, Evelyn, take that orchid story and fluff it up to add a few more items into that story? How would you fluff up that orchid story?
Right, so the orchid needs to do something in some way, because it feels like we just described the character. So we could get rid of my and just say orchid plant, beautiful, slow, floriferous or something, in that it is very slow growing, very few leaves, but when it sends out a lot of flowers. So I would just try to include perhaps one word that gives it something that it's doing.
Nice. Cool. And once again, we can take these stories in different ways. And I think I want to emphasize that. Get this 6-word story, and it becomes the seed that grows into a full-blown story that you can say in 90 seconds and use that in a professional setting. Renee, I'm going to come back to you and give you another shot. Would you like to try?
2 little baking soda flat cake.
Oh, perfect.
There we go. Very succinct, very sad, but very funny as well. Thank you so much, Renee. Evelyn, any more?
Yeah. Paul says the boy danced in the sun.
Nice, nice. So Evelyn, once again, I'm going to challenge you. Take that story, the exact story there, and expand on it into a 30-second story. How can you take that? Add a little more flavor to it, but that's a great kernel for a pop of a story.
Yeah, the boy danced in the sun, calling to the spirits that would come to protect his village. And the spirits loved his dance, and the village was saved.
Yeah, isn't that amazing? And probably not what the person who put that story out there was thinking, but you can take these kernels of stories and put them into different directions. But the idea is to start with something that's very short and sweet and petite and neat, just like this. Evelyn, is there another one in the chat?
Yeah, we have one from Matthew. It says, Kauai, Hawaii, breathtaking vistas, stay forever.
And that is a future story, right? That's not a travel story. That is a story of destiny right there, and you can fill it in. So I thank you, everybody, for your participation. And we didn't get, of course, get a chance to have everybody share their 6-word stories. But the idea of brevity is very important for professional storytelling. But I would also say it's important for all storytelling. Take your stories, once again, maybe it's a 5 to 7 minute story as you told in your icebreaker at Toastmaster, and then shrink it down, concentrate it, and you get it into a powerful 90-second version. And those 90-second versions could be used in different ways to have different meanings. You could add the moral of the story after you've told your standard 90 seconds story and put it into any presentation as an example to emphasize your point. Stories, so powerful, amazingly so. I think there's a lot of people out there saying, yeah, stories work, but you have to believe it. And I think it's easy to believe when you start telling your own stories, and people may forget your name, but they remember you, because stories live in our heart for ages and ages to come. That's why we hope you become a better storyteller, consistently grow in your storytelling, and consistently share your stories as a powerful communicator and leader. On behalf of Evelyn and Dennis, myself, thank you for your time and your participation tonight. We now return control to our Toastmaster, Renee.
Great. Thank you guys so much. That was a wonderful talk.